This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. This week I'm joined by Jerry Strickmatter as my co-host, who is a board member of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy and a former legislator from Lancaster County. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's so nice of you to sit in for Maura. Maura's on assignment today, and we really appreciate your presence here. We want to talk a little bit about the state's economy and about the governor's address, the governor's budget address. We find that the governor used to have a State of the Commonwealth address and a budget address, and Governor Ridge a few years ago decided to combine them because they were so close together. And we have one of the best people in the Commonwealth here to talk to us about that, and that is Dave Patti. Dave, welcome back. You are the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you both.
So you heard the governor's speech today, and what did you think?
Well, you know, as you said, the governor has to do this every year, and we give a new governor an extra month to get ready for it, so it was a little bit later than normal, early March. But I think he obviously got a lot of applause, mostly from the Democratic side of the aisle, but we do this in a joint session of the House and Senate of the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Warmly received. He was friendly, affable, reminding them, of course, that he's been out to see most of them, that he's been making the rounds, trying to prepare the ground, if you will. And he very much was upbeat. I mean, in terms of just giving a speech, it was a good speech. He also had always said that he wanted to be bold and be a new kind of governor, and kept reminding us of that today. And I think came out boldly. There are a lot of moving parts to this budget, a lot of details. Hey, you may pay more here in taxes, you may get this over here in either tax relief or a new program you like or something like that. So I think for a lot of people, it's going to take a little time to sort through it.
Maybe for our viewers, you can review where we've been and where we're going in the fact of, you know, what those percentage increases in taxes were and what the percentage increase in spending is going to be. Sure. You know, and I think it's going to be sort of tough to get a fully funded budget passed in time in a little over 100 days. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally, the fiscal year ends on June 30th, and we like to have a budget done more or less on June 30th. As you know from your own time in the legislature, June 30th, July 1, July 2, July 3, not uncommon. And we've had those years that have gone longer. And certainly Governor Rendell's first budget, where he had some issues, and he never had anything on June 30, right? Whereas for the last 4 years we did, just barely some nights, but we did do it. Over the last few years in the Corbett administration, you of course were also coming off the Great Recession, as people now refer to it, and so state revenues followed the economy. They were down, and Governor Corbett, having taken a no tax pledge, did everything he could possibly do to make sure that he didn't have to raise taxes during those 4 years. So for a lot of his detractors, these were big spending cuts, reductions, things that they found unpalatable, and in fact which Governor Wolf ran on. Well, I'm going to restore Corbett funding cuts, whether they were true funding cuts or, you know, some issues with loss of federal dollars and that kind of thing, kind of all behind us at this point. So, you know, not surprisingly, Governor Wolf, having run very much on education funding, came out today saying, well, look, I'm doing $400 million of new funding for basic education. I'm going to do additional funds for pre-K, early childhood spending, $120 million, I think it was there. I'm going to do some more spending for other parts of education that were cut in the past. And he flat funded special ed and some other elements, and kind of waved his hands on the whole teacher pension thing. And in fact, to your question about tax increases and spend, during the 4 years of the Corbett administration, Pennsylvania's per capita spending went down, and our spending as a percentage of our gross state product went down. All indicators of fiscal discipline, and in fact, you know, for the way at least we rank states, put Pennsylvania ahead of other states. Governor Wolf is saying his general fund is a under 3% increase and just $29.9 billion, which would be in line with the last few years. However, and this is a big however and a big asterisk, he has moved some $1.7 billion in what the state spends on pensions for teachers and state workers out of the general fund to another budget line item, or to another fund. And he's also proposing to raise state taxes and use those for property tax rebates, which will be popular in some areas of the state of Pennsylvania, to offset the property taxes. So he puts that in a different fund. If you add those back in, the Philadelphia Inquirer has already done the math, so I'm quoting from the Inquirer here, but they say the total would be really a 16% increase in spending. And if that number from the Inquirer is accurate, that would be the biggest increase I think that we've ever seen, certainly that we've seen in my 30 years here in Harrisburg.
A 16% an increase in spending almost makes one's head spin. And yet, the other day, he said one of our major problems with the economy was the fact that we don't have enough entrepreneurship. In fact, what he said was Pennsylvanians traditionally suffer from low self-esteem. And because we have low self-esteem, we're not entrepreneurs and we don't create jobs. And that's one of the basic problems with Pennsylvania's economy. What did the Pennsylvania Business Council think about that?
Well, I'll leave it to others to think about whether or not esteem is the issue. I'm not a psychologist. But I mean, you would look at some things like tax policy and business. I know gets accused of, all you think about is taxes. And there's a lot more to stimulating an economy, to growing jobs than just taxes. But those are the numbers that are the easiest to figure out, frankly. You also look at things like education and the trained workforce and the infrastructure, and the governor knows that and has talked about that. But he proposes to raise the personal income tax rate from 3.07 to 3.7%. In Pennsylvania, and use that to fund some of this education and other work he wants to do. Now, our personal income tax is probably our fairest tax in the normal academic sense of that word, in that it is the broadest base. It applies to almost everybody. It's a flat rate. There are virtually no deductions. How much did you make? Multiply it by the rate, send it in. So, something that even Ronald Reagan aspired to with the federal income tax rate. The increase, however, going up, is a fairly significant increase. I'm sure that some people will say, well, $630 a year additional taxes on $100,000 of income, how much is that? But it's a percentage basis, it's pretty high. And if you are those entrepreneurial companies, this is how you pay your business taxes. So for a sole proprietorship, a partnership, an S corporation, an LLC, this is the tax rate, and it's a fairly significant tax increase. The other element that I would point to in terms of entrepreneurship, and we don't know the fine print yet, but is an expansion of the Pennsylvania sales tax, not only in the rate going from 6% to 6.6, but an elimination of most of the exemptions. It looks like the exemptions on food, clothing, and medicine will stay. But if you have to buy accounting services as a business, or legal services as a business, or computer services as a business, or other kinds of business services, and those are now taxed, that's increasing your cost of doing business. It's also a little unclear if you're the one that's in those businesses, what happens to you? Will you be able to pass on the full 6.6%? Will people be able to avoid that tax by buying over the internet, by going out of state to buy their legal services, their accounting services, and that kind of thing? So I'm sure some entrepreneurs are now sharpening their pencils and getting out their calculators and going, what does this do? And what does this do to maybe my plans to start a new business? For larger corporations, it's a mixed bag. We're still trying to figure it out. He proposes reducing the corporate net income tax rate, which I think is a great idea. We are the highest flat rate, second highest marginal rate in the country at 9.99, it's essentially 10% tax rate. And remember that America is the highest corporate net income tax rate in the world, so it's not great to be in Pennsylvania. So he proposes taking it down well below the national median. Good news. But he wants to do something very complicated called mandatory unitary combined reporting. If we haven't lost viewers already, we will if I explain.
What does that mean, Dave?
What it means is the bottom line is that things that you do in other states now become part of your tax base in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And so it basically broadens the base. The governor says it closes the so-called Delaware loophole. It does a lot more than that. It's very complicated, and states that have implemented it have taken years to implement it successfully, and there's been a lot of litigation. So while the governor might see it as quick revenue to the state, I suspect it would take a while to litigate and work out implementation. And again, it's a complicating factor for business. I'm sure there would be winners who, by the rate reduction, would do better. I'm also sure there would be losers who, even with a rate reduction, will pay more. I'm not sure we know yet at this point how that all balances out.
Since the budget process is starting now in March, rather than February, we have less time. The appropriation process, committee process, has to go through with the budget hearings, and have all 4 caucuses, look at this budget and tear it apart and build it back up again, and with new ideas. What do you see the Business Council doing with the budget hearings?
Well, I'm sure we will be particularly talking to the 4 caucus budget chairs, the appropriations chairs. They were all, of course, given a much more extensive briefing in advance, both the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're digging in now. They will, as you suggest, have hearings, department by department. We will watch most carefully, probably, with the Revenue Department. Robin Weissman, who was, Eileen McNulty, who's a career professional, tapped for revenue. She certainly knows her stuff. She was the secretary for Governor Casey, and then she was executive deputy secretary for Governor Rendell. So listening to what is the fine print for mandatory unitary combined reporting, how exactly will you handle the nexus for sales tax? When does it apply in state, out of state? How do you defend the loss of these exemptions? Would be something that I'd really want to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think the governor received most of his advice that he used to put this budget together? I know this is a real insider question, but did he rely more on John Hanger? Did he rely more on Katie McGinney? Did he rely more on his new budget secretary, his own ideas? I mean, he did warn the legislature, you can reject my ideas, but I want you to come then with your ideas. Where is he getting his ideas from, Dave?
Great question. And I think, first of all, I don't think there were a whole lot of surprises. I think most of the people who were watching the campaign closely through the fall, knew that this is where he was on a lot of these things. He didn't make commercials about them, didn't campaign on them. In fact, it would have been interesting, would have he won had he done so. But maybe he would have. Some people may have taken the deal, for instance, and others not. But I don't think it was a big surprise. On the tax policy, largely it is very aligned to a tax commission that Governor Rendell had, that he was the chair of as the revenue secretary. So if you knew his work in 2000, I guess it was 6, 7, 8 range back in that time, and what came out of that commission, actually I guess he was still one of my members at the time, becoming the revenue secretary when he was on that commission. There's a lot of things that are similar. So no surprises there. We've known that he has supported these ideas for 10 years. Other elements, frankly, he cited Dave Reed. I'm not sure if the majority leader of the State House was pleased to be cited today for suggesting a personal income tax rate increase in return for a property tax, but that was one of the citations offered in the speech. And I think, obviously, he heard from interest groups, those who supported him throughout the campaign and over the years, and in the interim months since winning the election, on some of the things about property taxes. He certainly knows that there are a lot of hot spots around the state where Republican lawmakers want to do something about property taxes, and he cited that in a speech, and cited House Bill 76, Senate Bill 76. So it's an amalgam of ideas from a lot of sources.
Okay. Well, I know we always run out of time too quickly, but in the last couple of minutes, how about those areas that weren't touched upon that you think that should have been said, or your members think that they should have been said, or would have charted a better path to take care of the spending problems?
Item one for us, and I think item one for a lot of the business community, is what are you going to do about public pensions? And in fact, you had to dig deep to find out. I think he said something in passing about, oh, by the way, this is going to go into this fund for pensions. But there is no pension reform here, no matter how you define the word reform. We are just taking it offline and kind of go, okay, we'll let the current system continue on. I'll just take it out of the budget and maybe we'll forget about it. But there's nothing that stops the pension liability from continuing to grow. And there's nothing that does anything for the municipalities and the school districts and their pension crisis, which in some ways is more troubling to me than that the state faces. In terms of the percentage of their budget, I think it's worse. So absolutely no discussion really substantive about pension reform. Perhaps he thinks that's for another day and something he'll do later. I'd welcome hearing from him on that later on. But I think that's the one big glaring piece.
In the last 15 seconds, will we actually see property tax refunds and reform?
I've asked some people who are more knowledgeable in the budget than I, is there a requirement in any of the documents so far that says dollar for dollar reduction if a school district gets more state money? And nobody has found that yet. I can't say it's not there, but we haven't found it yet.
And we've heard that. The people of Pennsylvania have heard that over and over again in many different administrations. And personally, Jerry, I've never received any. But I know there may be some people that have. But
Right.
yeah, it just seems
Well,
like
this is about
empty.
living in a school district who is up against their millage cap. So while he's saying it's a 50% average reduction, he's not saying every Pennsylvanian gets a 50% reduction.
Okay. Dave, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. And we'll be back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Jerry and I are going to be talking about minimum wage in Pennsylvania and independent and small business, and we're fortunate enough to have with us Kevin. Welcome back. Kevin Shivers is, of course, the Executive Director of the National Federation of Independent Business in Pennsylvania.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And, of course, you've been with us before, Kevin, and we're very happy to have you back again. The governor just delivered his budget address here in the Commonwealth, and one of the issues, of course, that you have wrestled with over the years is the whole issue of minimum wage. Jerry and I were wondering if you could talk about what did the governor propose and what is your position and your organization's position on that.
Sure. The governor proposed raising the state minimum wage, the wage that you pay for people with no skill, to $10.10 an hour. And what small businesses will tell you is that it's easy to be generous when you're spending other people's money. What our concern is that, we do believe that the governor is trying to solve a problem, right? There are those in our society who are less fortunate. We have a teen unemployment rate that's running rampant in our state, particularly minority teen unemployment, but that raising the minimum wage would be the absolute worst way to help those in the lowest rungs in our society, economic rungs in our society, to actually grow up. Let me just throw out a couple of statistics about minimum wage earners in Pennsylvania. 81% of them have no children. Almost 2/3 of them are under the age of 24. Most live in households where the family income is about $40,000 a year. And in fact, 1 in 4 live in a household where the family income is about $75,000 a year. So here, who are we really talking about?
How many are there, though?
Very few. Most people are making more than minimum wage after 6 months. And when you're taking a look at, who these minimum wage earners are, they're mostly teenagers. So if you're raising the cost of a job with no skill, that means there's going to be fewer jobs available. That has a long-term economic impact problem, Charlie, because we're already finding, highly educated young people that are graduating from college with blank sheets of paper. And you have employers who are unwilling to risk giving them their first job because they have no work experience. So now you're going to force that employer to pay more for that no-skill job, that no-skill employee. What are they going to do? Well, they're just going to keep that job unfilled. Maybe instead of hiring somebody to take out the trash or maybe to take the orders at the drive-through window, the employer, the manager themselves, the owner, they're going to do that job, or maybe they're going to ask 2 other people in the job to do the work of that open position. So it's a really significant, it's a great soundbite. Let's raise, the minimum wage and help people. It's just horrible public policy.
But it sounds like, there are going to be many people who are being hurt by this, in the fact that if somebody wants to get an entry-level job, or as I refer to it, like a training wage, give them a chance, get trained, see if you like it or not, see if you want to move up within the company or go get other education or whatever it might be. How many people are going to be affected by that and really hurt those people that need that training, need that opportunity, for that first job or second job or third job, or first in a profession that you just want to try out? How many are going to be hurt, do you think?
Sure. When you take a look at the states that have raised the minimum wage, and you take a look at labor force participation overall, it's about 4 points lower in states that have raised their minimum wage versus states that haven't. Because again, when you raise the cost of labor, employers need less of it. I mean, that's just simple supply, and demand economics. When you take a look at teen unemployment, it actually is 6 points higher. So in places where they've raised the minimum wage, the idea of, helping those people at the lowest rungs in our society, those are individuals who are actually helped by a whole host of state programs, right? It's not just the minimum wage that's, a family sustaining wage. I mean, these are individuals that are receiving, various other public assistance services, and they still would be receiving those services even if you raise the minimum wage. So in effect, the only people that you're really boxing out are, again, first-time job seekers, maybe those people that have been trying to return to the workforce after an extended period of time. Maybe they raised a family and now they're trying to re-enter the workforce, and those are the people that are going to be harmed by this. It's a great boon for existing Pennsylvanians, right? I mean, if you have a job right now, yeah, sure, because scale ultimately is going to go up. But the long-term economic impact of raising the minimum wage means that our workforce in the out years, we're going to have a higher cost of public assistance and other types of welfare programs, because those individuals are not going to have a real work history.
One of the things that the new Governor Wolf, has done, Kevin, is he must have looked through the pages of history, and he saw that one of the leadership techniques that Winston Churchill had was leadership by walking around and observing things for themselves, and then going back and making decisions and creating ties with a whole host of people. Apparently, the new governor is surprising lots of people around the Capitol by walking around the Capitol, talking to legislators informally in a way that we haven't seen many recent governors do. Has the governor come down informally and walked into your office and wanted to chat about this issue or chat with you? Are you looking forward to that kind of contact?
You know what? He may choose to do that, but we offered the respect that the office is entitled, and we actually went and met with him. And you know what? He's a charming individual. I think he is being given some bad advice, particularly with the last budget. Certainly, you can't be successful in business if you don't trust your teams and trust your managers and be able to work collaboratively to come up and solve problems. But I think in this public policy realm, I think he's being ill-served with some bad advice. I mean, the idea in a state budget, you have the governor that makes a proposal, and the legislature comes up with a counteroffer, and it's just like any type of a business negotiation, right? I mean, you try and meet somewhere in the middle. But I think the strategy the governor's taken with this budget is to start so far over that the middle kind of grows a little bit, right, by a couple $2 billion. I don't think that's the type of reaction he's going to receive in the General Assembly. It's certainly not the initial reaction we've heard from legislative leaders. I think, the natural way, Pennsylvanians, I think, are going to, as they're taking a look at what this proposal means to them, what families, as they're looking at how are they going to pay the bills this month, they're going to take a look at the costs, and they're going to take a look at the proposed benefits, and I think they're going to realize this is a net loser for them. Applaud the governor for reaching out to people, taking input. Ultimately, he's got to be the first one to propose a plan. He did so, and I think the discussion is going to start now, and I think the plan that we ultimately see get passed into law is going to look inherently different than the proposal that was outlined today.
I think, a point that our viewers would be concerned about, to follow up on your question that I asked before about who is being impacted and whatever. I didn't hear a whole lot of talk about the children, and I think they're being forgotten. Like, for instance, if the minimum wage was the answer to all of our problems, and raising the taxes anywhere between 10% and 20% that are being done, then you'd think the children would be up front here. But obviously, they're being forgotten because with the child labor laws that are in place, the workers' comp problems that we have, children who want to work at 10 and 12 aren't able to. You're not able to have a lemonade stand. The government wants to come in and give all these regulations on that side. And then here, when they might be ready, to work, legally, with getting through this, then you're going to say, well, no, the barrier's too high. So if it was really true that 1010 was perfect, then why not make it $25?
Sure.
Why not make it 30, right? Yeah. Because then that would really help. But still, when I hear this, it'd be helping people, and not the ones we really want to help, but the children.
Well, and to your point, that's why the idea of a minimum wage and a raise. I mean, that's why it's a false problem, because the argument would be that if you raise the minimum wage, then these people would being self-sustaining. Raising it to $10 an hour isn't going to do anything else to improve the circumstances of these individuals, right? They're still going to have, if you are truly you have a family that you're supporting, you're not getting any other benefit that's going to help you become more self-sustaining. So that's where this is just, it's a red herring. And ultimately, again, the people that are really going to be punished by this are, those that are looking for their first job opportunity, those that are trying to re-enter the workforce. Those are the individuals that, it's going to, long term, as I mentioned earlier, the economic impact of those people not having a work history is going to be by far more harmful to Pennsylvania's economy, than the current situation. So.
Okay, well, Kevin, thank you very much. Jerry and I want to thank you for coming on board with us today and for sharing your thoughts with our viewers. We'll be back next week for a new edition of Behind the Headlines. Check us out then, and don't forget to check our website, Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and the Voice of Pennsylvania. And don't forget to listen to the Song Parlor with John Patterson. We'll see you next week.